I used to call it the biggest secret in IT. Like there's this job that you don't have to go to university for and get in debt for 4 years that you can break into in about a year and start with a good salary.
What was your salary back then when you first started going to like AWS cloud?
My first salary was in the six figures.
Okay, cool.
The Linux for Jobs program is 6 months, and then they get career support where we help them get placed into a job. They can call it different ways in the industries, but normally it's a sysadmin role. Sometimes it's going to be called Linux engineer, but it's all the same stuff in general. Then our second program is called Cloud for Jobs. It was known as AWS for Jobs. And this program is designed to take people with no IT background and prepare them for a cloud engineering role.
Hey, what's up, guys? It is Andrew Baines here from the Custom Journeys podcast. I appreciate you guys for supporting our YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. I have a very special guest today. We have Paloma Vilceus. She is actually one of the co-founders for yellowtail.tech. If you're not familiar with Linux systems administrators, she's going to kind of break down what this career opportunity is, how to get into it, and how her company, yellowtail.tech, can help you do that, hopefully within a year. And so if you don't recall, we actually had a previous guest on, JV King. He went through the program, talked about how he went from, I think, about $30,000 a year up into the six-figure range after going through the yellowtail.tech program. So Paloma is actually one of the founders. Her and her husband started the company, and she's going to break down what the role is, how you can get into it, and why you should be checking out yellowtail.tech. So Paloma, thank you for joining today. How you doing?
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks for having me today.
Great. Cool. Well, yeah, I appreciate you for hopping on here this Friday afternoon. You know, I know it's a bunch of things you could be doing. Is weather nice out there in DC? You're in DC, right?
Some days. It's that part of the year where it's kind of spring, but doesn't feel like it every day.
I appreciate you for hopping on here. Linux systems administrator, that's like one of those unknown or not as popular roles in like the IT tech world. And like, it's kind of like a hidden gem in a sense. And I would love for you to kind of like kick it off by kind of just giving us a brief overview of like what a Linux systems administrator is. Cause like not nobody, but a lot of people don't know what that role is. And I kind of have a little bit of insight. When I was in college, I took a high performance computing class, and I'm a mechanical engineer by trade. We used to use a program called Abacus to like analyze when parts were going to break. And so you can download Abacus on like your desktop or your laptop computer if you want, but we were using it on like supercomputers. And so we would go into the Mac and then pull up Linux, and we would just use the command line to like run Abacus on different jobs. So I got familiar with like ls, cd, chmod, like the basics of the basics, right? I thought I was doing something, but I know like there's a whole other group of people out there that like monitor the server, set them up, like do all the back end things that are like people like me that are kind of oblivious to what's going on behind the scenes can use the software. So I guess could you kind of kick it off by like just telling us a little bit about like what is a Linux systems administrator?
So a Linux system administrator normally manages the IT infrastructure at an organization. And like before defining what a sysadmin does, I have to kind of define what IT services are and what IT infrastructure means. So IT infrastructure is usually what powers the technology services that they offer at an organization. And that offering can be internal. So think about internal websites, like applications that run as web servers, or like more complex things like an HR tool. We also run backup systems. So you may have a workstation and all your files are stored in another place so that if you needed them in a few years, or if something happened to your computer, you have like that certainty that the data is there. So that happens for your personal computer, but it also happens for some of those high importance servers in your environment. We also run things like ticketing systems that can be used for like customer service reps if your organization has that, or even tech support. So we kind of run infrastructure that supports our own teams. We have tools like time servers. So if you're in an organization that's time sensitive, so think about a bank, they need to make sure that every system in the environment has a consistent time, because you can't have one thing record one transaction at one time and another transaction at a different time that's not synced up. So these things are like mission critical, believe it or not. We also run monitoring systems that basically monitor all these appliances and systems that we host, because we want to be proactive about how we learn about problems in our environment. Like, we don't want our users to start complaining on Twitter that there's an outage when we could have known that ahead of time. There's also network security tools like firewalls that we manage, email services, VPN services, IT development environments. Being a sysadmin is a pretty broad role, and you could end up in an environment where you're doing all these things or just a subset of these things. Because one of the things I see frequently is that depending on what organization you work at, their IT departments may look completely different from one place to another. So there may be companies that have like a separate IT team per department. There's others that are going to have more of a central IT department that supports everything. So again, it depends on where they fall.
It seems like it's almost like a thankless job. If everything is going good, people may never like see you guys or hear about what you do. But yo, as soon as the server goes down, they're like, yo, this trash IT, like they never get anything
Well,
right.
yeah, the end users don't know about us, but everybody in our organization tends to know about that, and that justifies the pay we get. Because if things go down, well, our organizations can't fall short of that mission that they're trying to accomplish. So if that is selling services and their systems are down, well, they can't sell services and they may lose money every minute. And depending on the organization, it can be a lot of money. But not only money, like some organizations just offer things, and that's what they do. Like, they have a service, let's say the National Library of Medicine. They're not a for-profit organization, but they have a catalog of all the medical research in the US that is offered to universities, to researchers, to everybody in the world, actually. And an hour down is an hour where they're not fulfilling that mission. So that's why sysadmins are important, because we help manage those systems that make these organizations be able to accomplish their goals.
Gotcha. No, that's great. So it seems like it's very broad in terms of industry. It's not just one specific, like you mentioned banks, you mentioned like research library, you mentioned like the full thing, for profit, nonprofit. So it seems like it's a lot of variety. I imagine if you're working for like a super big company, like you may just be doing like ticketing, like addressing issues. Whereas if you're for a small organization, you do like everything, like ticketing, monitoring, I don't know, whatever else may be. Is that kind of the case?
That's exactly the case. At Yellowtail.tech, we have students that go into all sorts of jobs. So, like, we've had people that finish and they end up in a monitoring role where they're literally working overnight, just making sure that things are running. If something happens, then they go and they log into that environment, do some research, figure out if something is actually happening, and then they can fix it or escalate depending on the problem. Then there's other people that go into other types of sysadmin roles where they're more into building things or deploying things, working with DevOps teams even. Um, so it depends on where you fall, as I said.
Gotcha. Which of the roles that are out there, or like I guess the different responsibilities underneath like Linux systems administrative, which would you say is like the most demanding and the least demanding? Because in my mind, I'm thinking like the monitor, the person that's just purely doing monitoring is kind of depending on the company, they may just be like chilling, kick back with their feet up. Whereas like there may be like the person who's deploying software, they're like, I don't know, highly stressed out. So just so people can kind of get an understanding of like what's the day in the life or which one is more demanding, what would you kind of say there?
Well, each one has their its own issues. So the people monitoring tend to be in high stress environments. Like, they have a monitoring team because they probably have thousands of servers, So there needs to be like 24/7 type of management. But then if you work in a smaller environment, they may not have that. Like you may be on call at night, but you're not actively watching the systems because there's no real potential for things to go down. So they have to be awake all the time, alert, and watch all these things. They have to handle fires, and fires are stressful. Like again, because what we do is mission critical. Whenever something is broken, there is a big problem, and companies have protocols on how to deal with these issues. Then on the sysadmin side, where you're more into doing proactive changes to environments and deploying things, the I think it's more involved. Like there's more work to do, and like you have less downtime because you're constantly testing things, documenting things, and making changes that could break systems. So there's always that risk when you make a change.
I think that kind of gives people a better perspective of like what to expect in like the day to day. And yeah, I
Yeah,
think
and
I
I
watched.
think the monitoring roles are like they're not so many these days because now there's more automation in general. So when things break, the alert systems manage things more proactively. And in general, there's changes that happen tend to go through dev stage test environment. So they kind of can predict what can happen. So again, I only see monitoring teams in very big organizations.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah, that's before you broke it down, I was just picturing like if I had a monitoring role and that's all I was doing, I would try to figure out how can I set up like alerts so that like it just blares like some loud noises and pings or whatever in case something goes wrong. So I'm not just sitting there watching the screen the whole time.
I don't
Um
know. There's an app for that.
See, that's what I'm saying. That's why I was like, hey, I would just what there has to be an app where I would make an app where I'm just like, I'm not gonna be sitting here staring at the TV all day or the screen all day. You mentioned like the role is highly important, and that's part of the reason why you guys can demand like the salary that comes with it. And people always want to know about money, right? Like you need money to survive in this world. What kind of salary can people typically expect, like as a Linux systems administrator? And I guess like just starting out, like entry level, so like maybe just out of the yellowtail.tech program, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, and then also maybe like more senior. What can they kind of expect?
So first of all, I'd like to tell you that this is like asking me how much does a doctor make after they graduate?
I
Like
got you.
anybody knows that depends on many things. If you're in Kentucky and if you're in New York, your salary expectations are totally different. So location matters a lot. Another thing is the interviews tend to be what they call an adaptive interview process. So basically, they're interviewing you for a role, and that role can be a junior level or like a mid level position, and they're trying to get a feel of where you fit so that they can put you in either one of these categories. So your performance during an interview will determine what salary the company can offer in many cases. Of
Gotcha.
course, company to company, there's differences. You'll find very large companies that need very large teams. They tend to pay less. It's surprising, but yeah, big corporations don't necessarily have the highest paying admin roles because they have many people like you in the environment, and they have to keep those, they have to manage those costs. Another thing is like if you're coming through a contract, so let's say you're contracting for the government and you come through an agency, well, they may eat into a bit of the salary that was allocated for you. And this is, I know this is room for a lot of pain. So in general, and I'm sorry to be vague about this, the best way to get a clear picture of salary is to go to a platform like Indeed or Glassdoor and look for the averages for the role name that you're interested in for your city or state. And that's going to give you a more accurate starting point. Because if I tell you, like, yeah, we start at 90, somebody in Alabama may not be able to get that. And I don't want to like create a false expectation.
No, I got that. I respect that because I mean I don't want somebody to hear you say, "Yo, you'll make 90K after whatever," and they're like, I don't know, Omaha. Where's middle of nowhere? Like somewhere in Idaho, maybe. And
Yeah.
like, I don't know. I could be completely wrong on this, but
There. They need
yeah,
society there. Yeah.
but okay, I can respect that. But no, so I appreciate that insight. I was also like in preparation for your interview, I was watching a lot of YouTube videos trying to get a sense for, hey, what does a Linux systems administrator do? How do you get into this role? Those were like oftentimes the two biggest questions that came up. And then also I found like a article, I think it's like redhat.org. And the story I was reading, the guy said, hey, a lot of times people just kind of stumble into this career, like where maybe they were like a hobbyist and like they were playing around with Linux, trying to figure things out, and they just kind of, or they just kind of naturally, there was a need within the organization, so they kind of learn more and more.
Yeah.
Is and so I see you nodding your head. So how did you get into like the Linux systems administrator world before getting into YellowTech or starting YellowTech? But how did you kind of find your way in this industry?
Okay, so that's actually a long story. And a bit funny. So I'm actually a career changer. In my mid 20s, I migrated to the US to live with my then fiance. And in that period, I was ready for a career change. So I went to school for social sciences. And one of the jobs I had early in my career was working at the National Statistic Bureau in my country. There, I kind of was in an intersection between data, technology, but from a project management perspective. Um, so that kind of left me with the curiosity for computers. I got to use lots of statistics and data analysis tools, but that was never my main focus. So when I decided to change career, that was always in the back of my head. But I was very distracted. Like I was also considering going to school for a nutrition related degree. And fortunately, Juby, who was my fiance now, my husband, he convinced me that I should consider like that itch for tech that I have and not go into another low paying job because I was coming from one. He was like, I'm not trying to make a life with somebody that's not going to make money, right? um,
Cool.
so he was in IT, and I had access to both him and his network. So they convinced me to kind of choose a track. So it wasn't clear if it was going to be Linux or cybersecurity or coding. But the one message I got from everybody was choose a track and don't let anything distract you. Because at that point, there were a lot of things popping up, and like I would constantly meet people that were like, oh yeah, I graduated from the University of Maryland, I finished this management and information systems program, but I've never been able to get a job, so now I'm trying to be a DBA, I'm trying to be a Linux sysadmin, I'm trying to learn about cybersecurity. Like it's impossible to be all those things and to learn all those things at once. So the message from them was choose your path. And the other thing that I got from them was that because I was coming without a degree in the field, that I could use certifications to kind of demonstrate the knowledge I was gonna get. So in general, it was like you don't have to go to school. Getting in debt for 4 years is not really the smartest thing you can do. And also, you want to get a job soon, so that's not the irony. So somebody talked to me about Linux and system administration. I remember I got like the most elementary Linux system administration book you can imagine. Like yes, back then we used books. Um, because my options were books, Udemy courses, or going to school to learn a lot more than Linux. So I tried to do my own thing at the beginning to get the fundamental knowledge. And then once I was clear that I wanted to do Linux and open source in general, I kind of defined my path. I found what certifications are required for a Linux sysadmin job back then. I don't know if I mentioned that. I'm in the DC region. So there's lots of government jobs in DC, and there's also a lot of tech companies that have data centers in the region. So there's plenty of tech jobs. So I figured out what were they looking for. One of the things that I saw continuously was they looked for a Red Hat certified system administrator certification. Um, so that drove me to Red Hat, and I learned that that cert is practical. So basically, you're not answering multiple selection questions. Like you sit there and you are assigned something like a ticket or like many tickets, and you had like 3 hours to go through those tickets and hopefully resolve them. So I did that and I kind of defined what I wanted to do next. I found my first job and it's been a long time.
All right, good stuff. No, I appreciate you sharing the story because it shows like there's so many different pathways to get into it, right? Like you mentioned, like the people that had a degree from like University of Maryland, and it sounds like they were kind of splitting their efforts, or they weren't going about it the most efficient way.
Shiny new object. Every time somebody told them, like, hey, there's this new configuration management tool called Puppet, they would be like, oh, I need to go learn that. But they didn't have experience or the fundamental knowledge to take on that because college didn't prepare them for that.
No, and I think that's the good thing about like these alternative pathways, right? Because a lot of times college is so theoretical, it's not really like what's even being taught or being used in industry or in practice. How long did it take you, like once you decided, hey, I'm doing this? And I think it's great that you said like, hey, there's a demand here, so it's a lot easier landing a job, I think. But how long did it
Yeah,
probably take you from like that thought of like, okay, this is where I'm going to actually landing the job?
it took me a year.
A year, okay.
I could have waited more, added some more certs, and gotten a better job. But I was still very happy with my first job.
What do you think like employers valued the most specifically like when hiring you, and then also maybe even for like other people that are trying to get into the space? Is it the certifications? You guys probably don't have like a portfolio, but it's more so resume. But like what do you think like the employers valued when they were making the decision to hire you?
In my case, I was able to showcase the some of my abilities from my previous career. And I think that's one of the hardest things for career changers, figuring out how they can sell that. So I did a bit of project management. So I was very used to working with multiple teams that had multiple requirements, bridging that communication between them. So I was able to sell that. And I think that is what has helped me throughout my career. I end up working in lots of environments where the whole team is made out of men, and I'm the first woman to ever work there. So they tend to be loners that like to work on their own, and communication is an issue. And I kind of bring another spirit to that environment. I'm not claiming that's because I'm a woman, but maybe because my previous experience. And in general, I feel like I can be that bridge, and they see that early on in the interview process. The certifications do help, definitely. I see people that say like, "Oh, the certification is not a career." It's not, but it proves that you're talking to somebody that knows something, and so there's a little bit of doubt, like in the interview process, that goes away because they get that confidence, especially for those practical certs. In my case, also, I went after learning Linux. I kind of pivoted into cloud early on, and I like back then there weren't a lot of people with especially with AWS certifications. So for me to have Linux experience and cloud certifications, even when I didn't have cloud experience yet, that was huge. Like
Mm.
I was getting tens of emails from recruiters daily, and I was like, wait, I just started this job a couple of weeks ago. Like I want to stay here. um, so even my last employment, it was in the intersection of cloud and cybersecurity. I had no cybersecurity training at all. but they were like, it's easier to teach you cybersecurity than to teach you cloud. So yeah, we'd love to have you for this job.
Wow. Okay. No, that's great. I think it shows like you said, like it's a proof, right? Whether it's a degree, whether it's a cert, whatever, you need something to like de-risk it for the hiring manager or the recruiter and show them like a proof of concept or not.
Make them want to talk to you even.
Exactly. Exactly. Great. Before we go to Yellow Tech, you mentioned I'm gonna ask you your salary. So I know you said, hey, it kind of varies, like depending on like where you're at. But when you were first getting started, and I know this is years ago. I don't know how long ago. Um, but like how, like what was your salary back then when you first started, or when you like made that decision to go into like AWS cloud and the cybersecurity role?
Let's go with my first salary. My first salary was in the six figures.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Good. Good.
So in
Okay.
general, the DC area has high cost of living. So admins,
Uh,
it's normal to start above 100.
Gotcha. Okay. And then it took you about a year to make the transition into that space. I'm assuming based on your own personal experiences and then also Juby's like experience in helping you and helping others make the transition into this space, that's might be like the motivation or the catalyst for starting Yellowtail.tech. Is that kind of how it worked out?
Yeah. So after I got my first job, I became like the poster kid for I used to call it the biggest secret in IT. Like there's this job that you don't have to go to university for and get in debt for 4 years that you can break into in about a year, and start with a good salary. So I started to help. Well, we started to help people in our direct community. So like literally my brother moved to the US, and he was a lawyer in my country, but like getting a license to be a lawyer in the US would take him to school, and he was too old for that. So he was like, I'm willing to explore what you're doing. He did it. Like he
Nice.
literally followed me before I even got the job, and he got a job too. So then it was like friends and friends and friends, like help me, help me, help me, and we did that for several years actually. So once, and also that was very satisfying because we knew that we were helping these people from our community. They were changing their lives, impacting like their whole families because they were doubling, sometimes tripling their incomes. So after a few years of just helping people out, we decided we could formalize this and sell it as a service. So we actually started with an office and two classrooms in the DC area, and we started training groups of 8 to 10 students. And
Awesome.
we've been doing that for 8 years now. Though now we don't do classroom training thanks to
Gotcha.
COVID.
So tell us a little bit about Yellowtail Tech program. How long is it? What can students expect like by enrolling in the program, and then what kind of job will they get after they complete it and everything?
Sure. So Yellowtail has two programs. One is Linux for Jobs, and it's our longest running program. It's what we started with, and it's designed to take people with no IT background and prepare them for a Linux system administration role. We call it a program because there's several courses that make up that program. So our students will learn IT fundamentals, which include lots of networking, the core Linux for Jobs course, where they learn how to perform the sysadmin jobs. They learn like all the tools. Sometimes it's even third-party tools that support a sysadmin. They do cert prep to sit for the Red Hat Certified System Administration certification. And then they finish with an apprenticeship where they kind of get to put all that knowledge into practice in a real work environment. The Linux for Jobs program is 6 months, and then they get career support where we help them get placed into a job. So these students normally go to a job as a Linux. They can call it different ways in the industries, but normally it's a sysadmin role. Sometimes it's going to be called IT analyst or DevOps engineer or Linux engineer, but it's all the same stuff in general. Then our second program is called Cloud for Jobs. It was known as AWS for Jobs. We rebranded recently. Um, And this program is designed to take people with no IT background as well and prepare them for a cloud engineering role. This program is a bit longer, it's 3 months longer, so it's 9 months in total. And the reason for that is that we start them off with Linux before diving into AWS, because in our experience, our students that go into cloud environments end up operating Linux workloads in the cloud. So they need that Linux knowledge anyway. It's not they don't learn everything our Linux for Job programs entails, but they do get like a concentrated version of it, and it's like a prereq. The process is pretty similar. They learn IT fundamentals, Linux, and all the AWS services involved in deploying and operating workloads in AWS. And of course, they go through cert prep and they sit for the AWS SysOps certification. And then they do an apprenticeship. It's 9 months. It's very intense because there's a lot to learn when working in the cloud. It's a bit more complex than Linux.
Gotcha. So 6 months for the Linux program, 9 months for the cloud program. Cloud is not exactly a 2-for-1 deal in terms of like Linux plus cloud, but you get to learn the Linux components of it. Which would you say is like? And I know I'm gonna kind of put you on the spot here. Which would you say is like your preferred one? Like if you had to pick one of the two, which one would you start with or do?
This is mean. um, I really like the route I took where I learned Linux first and then cloud, but I don't think everybody has to do that. I do think you do become like a more well-rounded engineer if you do that, because what ends up happening is they take the Linux for Jobs course, they get a job, they get experience, and then they can come back and do the cloud program, or they can learn it on their own in their work environment. But both programs are great. So there is like they're both designed for people with no IT background, but we do have some requirements for computer literacy. So we run an assessment when they come to us, and that helps us determine if our programs are a good fit for them and which one is better for them.
That's great. I like that because it shows y'all aren't just trying to like. It's not a cash grab, right? It's not just like, hey,
We don't want your money. Like we want to make sure that the people that come to us are succeed in the field. That's why we're called Cloud for Jobs, Linux for Jobs, because our goal is to place you on a job. If we didn't
gotcha.
do that, then we're not successful. So we want to make sure that the people that we admit are actually able to go through the program. So in general, we consider ourselves like a low volume shop. Like we don't see ourselves training 60,000 people a year, even 6,000 people a year. It's not our goal. We want to remain low volume so that we can have like that white glove support for our students.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Good stuff. Um, okay, cool. So I one question that you were talking that kind of came up, and for me, and I think other people are kind of thinking the same thing. Is like the workload. Like, so I know it's 6 months and 9 months, but within a week, how much time would you say people typically dedicate to it? Is it like, because a lot of people are, I'm assuming, are working full-time jobs still, taking care of their family, and a lot of times it's the 25 and up people that are making this pivot. So what would you say is like the workload?
Like 90% of our students are full-time employed. We find there's a lot of people that believe in the process so much that they actually quit their jobs to focus on this. But that they're a minority. And in general, what we demand from our students, for the Linux for Jobs course, it's 7 to 10 hours a week to study, and then for the Cloud for Jobs is 10 to 12 hours a week.
Okay, cool. No, that's doable. I mean, pretty much like a couple hours a day, depending on.
There's periods where it may be more than that. Like when you're going through cert prep, you're gonna, like, especially if you have a practical exam like the Red Hat exams. you have to not only learn the things, but you have to learn how to do it quickly, because you're going through a test that assigns you tickets and you have to perform them in 2 to 3 hours. So not only do I have to know how to do it, I have to know how to do it without mistakes and quickly.
Gotcha. And you mentioned that your programs are designed for people who don't have like a technical background, and majority of people come in with a full-time job. What would you recommend people do, or what, like from your experience, how can people improve their chances of being successful in this program if they don't have a tech background, if they're working a job, they got kids at home? Like what can they do to like prepare, or even when they're in the program, how can they make sure they increase their chances of success?
So that's a great question. Actually, we always tell our student the process isn't easy. There's a lot that they're going to have to sacrifice for that period, because it takes a lot of work and commitment. So, in general, I encourage students to plan ahead how they will manage their time while they're with us. So, it doesn't really matter if they put in pre work or not. Like, we tend to give them everything they need during those 6 to 9 months. And also, sending them, like, them trying to do their own thing ahead of time doesn't necessarily expose them to the concepts in the right order. So that sometimes becomes a problem. And then the other thing is that I think the more they commit to the timeline of the program, the more successful they are, and the quicker that they can go back to their regular life. And I think I was talking to you about this privately. Like, I am when I go into cert prep mode, I kind of cancel out a lot of things. Like, there's no Netflix, there's no brunch, there's like I focus on that. Let's say during the winter, and then I know that spring and summer, maybe even fall, I'm going to be free to live my life, to spend time with my kid and all that. So I try to convey that to our students. And of course, this looks different person to person. Some may need to cancel their Netflix accounts and divorce social media for a while. Some others may need to make arrangements for somebody to watch their kids, or even handle meals, because they'll be busy from 6 to 8 most weeknights. So planning that, figuring that out before class starts is super important. And I think I told this to you earlier as well. I was lucky to have that support from my husband, and I think that kind of shows why I've been able to take my career this far. Um, some people need to figure out how to make more time by like rearranging their commutes, and like this is a real thing. Like, we have students that work in Jersey, live in New York. They have a 1.5 hour commute. They have to re-engineer their day to maybe stay at work until after the class and then commute. We have a student success coach that will help them figure out these things in general. Like, we provide that level of support.
That's good. I appreciate you breaking that down because, it takes a village a lot of times, especially really at any point in your life. Like if you're 18, 19, going to college, you need that support system both on campus and off campus. And I think sometimes people think, yeah, I'm an adult now, I got to do it all on my own, but that's not the case. Like you gotta have some people around you, accountability partners that's gonna be pushing you. Like, hey, Paloma, remember you said you're gonna be a Linux systems engineer. You cannot quit, can't give up. But then also you need people that are like gonna be hands on, like helping you. Like, hey, I need you to watch the kids for a weekend. Like, I got to take care of this class. So I appreciate you guys for acknowledging that, but then also providing like success coaches or support coaches to help them be successful. I think that's really critical. Um, so 6 months, 9 months for either program, anywhere from like 7 to 12 hours a week. Typically, it can change to kind of invest in that. We also got to talk about the money, right? Because there is a financial investment to make sure that you can make this transition. What is like the financial commitment that's required for for both programs, the Linux and the cloud program?
Yeah, so because the courses have different lengths, they have different costs, and it can go from 10 to 15K. We do provide financing options with several financing partners like Climb, Ascend, and TFC, which work with other industry boot camps.
Yeah, cool. And I think it's too late because what's today's date? Like what, the 14th? But I did notice that you guys were offering scholarships at one time. Is that something that is gonna be hopefully brought back in the future, or like, or what?
We are trying. I coordinate the partnerships team, And one of the things we're looking at is how to find more grants to help students, especially people that can't manage the cost of the program. So we did find a first grant that gave us $50,000, and that's what we're offering as a scholarship now. We're trying to get to as many people as possible. We're really encouraging women to apply to our program, because in general, like we see that we don't have as much participation from women, as we do from men. And yeah, it's moving. Those funds are gonna go pretty fast.
Gotcha. Is the application still open for that?
Yeah, it is open.
Okay, cool, cool. All right, awesome. Well, I will try to get this out ASAP.
2 weeks ago, so we're trying to stretch it.
Okay, nice. That's great. Yeah, I was looking on y'all's website, like at some of the testimonial stories. I'm not gonna lie, it looks like a family reunion from my perspective. Like it's a lot of like black and brown faces on there, and I'm like, I love the diversity that. And I don't know if that's organic or just like reflective of y'all's network, but I'm like, yo, it's like a family reunion on here. But I will say, there's definitely an opportunity for more women on there. Is that strategic, like as far as like, or does that just kind of fall that way? Because there's the misconception that there's not black and Latino people interested in this, but obviously you guys are showing that that's not true. So like, how does that kind of
So
work out that way?
it's organic and strategic at the same time. So one of the things, like, I am certain about is that I doubted my capacity to break into IT because I didn't have any role models that looked like me. So from the get-go, we said we have to be a company that has a face. Like, we have to show who we are, how we look, so that people can look up to me. Like, I hope my daughter has this as she's growing up, and that not looking like people in a field doesn't stop her from making these important decisions. So we wanted to do that, for our own community. Then the organic part is that we put ourselves out there, and people that look like us tend to come to us. We have students of all colors and races and everything, and like they're all over the country, especially after 2020 when we pivoted into virtual training. Like, we have students in California and in Idaho, like you mentioned that earlier, and I was like, yes, there's people there. In Michigan, like the whole country. It's even super curious. We have like 3 students in Hawaii.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
We have a lot of people, coming out of the military that are trying to figure out what to do in this, next stage of their lives. We have people that were working in the health field during, COVID, and were like, "Count me out. I don't want to do this anymore." One of my students, my AWS students, was actually a pharmacist inside a hospital, and he was like, "I do not want to do this anymore." And in 2021 he joined our program, and he's out of the he's out of the pharmacies. And now he's an AWS engineer. Yeah.
Man, that's amazing. I'm glad you shared like some of those success stories and even definitely the veterans. I think there's like a great opportunity there because I'm paying more attention to like the federal contracting space, the cybersecurity space. And a lot of times, some of these jobs, they would love for people to have clearance already. And so, like these military veterans, a lot of times they've gotten that depending on what their job was in the military. So, like, that's a perfect opportunity where you have the security clearance, go get a specialization, and like you could probably knock it out of the water.
Yeah, I'm. They sometimes get hired before they finish our program because they're golden.
Gotcha.
These jobs are sometimes provided to people that have no knowledge. Like, the agencies have to hire people that don't really fit the job description just because they have the clearance. So when an agency finds somebody that's cleared or clearable and has the knowledge and the certs, they're golden. We actually had a student who had a lesion while in the army, and then he went into, I think it was like the post office, and he's actually one of our students that quit his job to focus on this, and he's already employed. Like, we have so many nice success stories. Like, I could talk about this all day. And as I said, it's one of the most gratifying things, like, to know that whatever I do on a daily basis can change people's lives in this way.
Is there one particular story? I know you mentioned quite a few, like the pharmacists and everything like that, but is there like one in particular, like alumni story that you feel like, hey, this you got to know about this person or this individual, and then others can find inspiration? Okay, hit me with it, hit me.
So I'm gonna go really, really old school, and I'm gonna come back to somebody that graduated fairly recently. So the first one are Chip and Val. So as I mentioned, we started as a training school that had classrooms, physical classrooms in the DC area. So 8 years ago when we started, we did old school marketing and we even printed out flyers. So one of those flyers, I don't even remember how, it made it to like my neighborhood supermarket, and two guys that worked close around at a car dealership ended up calling us and eventually signing up. So today they actually have like 7 years of experience each, and they've completely changed their lives. So it was super exciting to kind of see their growth, because what I saw in them at that moment was two guys like in their late 20s that had done everything society expects us to do. Like they had fancy degrees, but they couldn't find jobs in their direct fields. So they were working at this car dealership and a bit frustrated about that. So again, we helped them transition. Now, one of them came back to Yellowtail and is our teacher. His name is Chip Vera. And again, he has 7 years of experience now, so that's kind of wild to me. Um, Another good story is David. So David is probably our like most loved teacher, and that's something I forgot to mention. Like 80% of our teachers are actually alumni. So David also lived in the DC area, but he came. I think he came already after the pandemic, and he brought the most upbeat energy as a student. Like he organized and led study groups. He started this thing called the Saturday study group, study party. There was music involved, and like everybody was happy to be there. So it was kind of wild to see this, because before, like the study sessions were like, okay, this is what I didn't get, can anybody help me with this, I'm trying to do this and it doesn't work. But he completely changed things for his cohort. He finished our program, and the dude got an offer at the NASA immediately.
Wow.
So to me, David is proof that when our students take leadership in helping others, they tend to be job ready before everybody else is. And I think it happens for a simple reason. Because they take that leadership, they put themselves in a situation where they are explaining these complex concepts and processes to other people. So when they go for an interview, they are completely comfortable doing that. And that gives them better jobs, better salaries, and all that stuff. So he is a superstar professional, a superstar teacher, and he's continuing to add certs to his belt. He's getting Kubernetes certs, and making a lot of money.
That's nice. We didn't talk about it too much, but you mentioned it when talking about your own personal journey and what you think employers look for or set you apart from others, like those communication skills. I think when people hear tech and they think tech, they just think, hey, go sit down and code, don't talk to anybody. But there's a big like soft skills or communication component that is very critical and can really help you throughout your career. And it's one thing to learn the material, but it's a completely different story if you can teach it. And that means you've like mastered it and you can communicate it effectively. So I think that's great that he took advantage of those opportunities. But and that's amazing. Like 80% of your teachers are former like alumni, or they are alumni of the program. So I think that shows that people really believe in what you guys are doing and building, and they're really bought in, not just doing it and then you never hear from them again. They're like literally part of the family. So that's cool. I got two questions. I just realized it's 5 o'clock your time on the East Coast. We're gonna try to get you out of here in a little bit. A lot of times we talk about like, hey, breaking into tech, breaking into IT, which is great, right? Like there's a clear pathway, and then you guys are doing a great job providing another pathway for non-traditional people or individuals. But once people break in, like, okay, I think it's still time to think about it. What's the next step and how to progress your career? Do you have any like advice or insights for like taking it a step beyond? Not just, hey, you landed your first job, but how do you make that next jump, whether it's a jump in salary or a jump in job title? What advice would you give there?
All right. So we just hit my favorite subject, by the way. So in general, I tell my students to think about long-term goals since the beginning. I myself took a napkin. Like I'm all about writing things, like taking handwritten notes. And I took a napkin and I wrote down my career path many years ago. So as I mentioned before, my immediate network advised me on using certs to build my career, and I did that. So I wrote down that I wanted to have an RHCSA, which is the Red Hat Certified System Administrator cert. Every time I say that, it requires a lot of brain power. And I also wanted to be a Red Hat certified engineer, which is like the second level cert at Red Hat. I said that I wanted to take a step back and go deep in my knowledge of networking. And I say a step back because I went for like a Network Plus certification, which, like, even when they see it on my resume, they're like, "Why did you get a Network Plus after you were an engineer?" But yes, it's. I noticed that I had some lagoons that I needed to patch regarding networking. So I did that, and then I said I wanted to get the 5 AWS certs that existed at that point, and I actually reached that goal in 2020. I did all of that, and my career has been a continuous climb. So I really take that personal learning to encourage everybody to think about how they can keep up with the technology that they work with. So like in my case, I can't claim those certs if I don't keep them active. So every 2 3 years I'm renewing them, and that forces me to keep up with the things that I know about. um, Also, we have to kind of have our eyes open onto where is the market going, like what's the next new thing. So when I became a Red Hat certified engineer, the next big thing was cloud. I am sure I am like one of the few women, or of the first women that got 5 AWS certs. But that was because very early on I said, wait, I want to do this, and I made that a goal. And I kind of put dates on the goals, right? So in general, I also constantly review like job descriptions to see what companies are looking for. So that's something that you can do. Now you can even you can help yourself do that with ChatGPT. So like you can feed ChatGPT a job description that you find online and ask it, what should I learn to be able to do this job? And that's gonna, you can see like, hey, I know about Linux administration, I know about these cloud services, but wait, they're mentioning these other tools that maybe I should learn about. So I ask everybody to always be proactive about that. I don't think there's a way to do it. Like I know when the growth discussion comes, there's a question of, do you stay in one company and you try to grow there, or you move? What I've seen is that early on in your career, sometimes you have to move to be able to get that updated salary, because when you're lowballed for your first employment, um, they're not gonna bump you up by 50K, but if you move to a different job, then you may see that increase. And I know that's important, and it's one of the things that makes this career actually attractive for a lot of people, because there's no ceiling. If you keep up with the tech, you're gonna be able to command more money every year. And that's true for myself and for our alumni.
That's great advice. First of all, like to your planning part, like you got to have a plan, map out to the best of your ability, right? Like things change, interests, passions, all that stuff change. And then technology changes as well. But if you don't have like a game plan, just kind of going with the flow and like wherever things take you. And then like if those shiny objects, like you were talking about earlier, pop up, you may just kind of randomly go try one of those. And then also to your point about like the salary, it doesn't seem like oftentimes I hear employees that stay at the same company, like they're restricted in terms of like how much of a raise they can get. Like that 2 to 8% is like what you can get. That's it. Whereas if you go get another
Yep.
job, you may be looking at 10,000, 20,000. The increase is a lot more. So I think that's a great thing to kind of keep in mind and keep in perspective throughout this job career process. So y'all have been doing Yellowtail Tech for 8 years. You completed like your plan, your master plan as soon as like 2020. Are you and Juby doing like Yellowtail Tech full time now? Because I know you guys want to keep it a certain size to keep the quality, but are you still like
Yeah.
working in the field as well, or what?
So in 2021, I took the leap and came back full time.
Okay,
And
nice.
Juby has been full time for 8 years.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. This has been great, a great discussion. My last question for you. Can we get you and Juby back on a couples interview? You know, I wanna help people on the entrepreneurship side. So this is a great interview for people that want to look at being like a Linux systems engineer, or doing something with the cloud. I think there's a lot of value that they can take from this discussion. But then there's a group of people out there that are crazy enough to want to be full-time entrepreneurs like you and your husband. And so I would love to get you and Juby, and I'm going to try to get you to commit on camera so I can hold you to it. But I would love to get both of you guys back to kind of talk about like what it's like building a tech company, educational technology company, ed tech company, and all the challenges there, and then also working with your spouse. So what do you say?
I'm in.
All right, let's do it. Awesome.
Really do that.
All right, cool. I appreciate it, Paloma. Well, how can people, the one thing we haven't discussed is how can people find Yellowtail Tech? How can they take like an assessment? You said there's an assessment or like an application where you kind of give them you kind of ask them some questions to see if they're a good fit. Like how can people find out about that and find the program in general?
Yes. So our website is the place to do that. Yellowtail.tech is the URL. We encourage people to start seeing information about both programs and then scheduling a 10-minute, we call it CSS call, career success. In that call, they'll be able to answer more questions about the program, any doubts they have. Then they can meet with our enrollment team, take that survey, understand our financing options, and basically decide if it's a good match for both the company and the prospect. We have great people as career success coaches. We have Pete and Kim, and they're awesome. Like Pete has even taken our program so that he can understand what it is that we actually do. Like he sat for the program for 6 months. And then Kim is also amazing. Like when our students find jobs, they like reach out to them and like thank them for convincing them, because there's a lot of self-doubt in the process. Like when you decide to change careers, it's scary. And you need people that are going to be there throughout the way, helping you actually stay committed to this goal. And I think they do that.
That's great, and shout out to Pete, man. 'Cause I think a lot of times these people that are in non-technical roles don't really take the steps to like go above and beyond and learn more about whatever role they're recruiting for or whatever role they're supporting as a coach or whatever. So I think that's great that he did that, because I mean he can speak the language. He knows exactly what they're learning, and then also what the recruiters are looking for from their standpoint. So I think that's amazing. One thing, like is the cohort like, is it seasonal or is it like a wait list? You email them when it's available. Like, how often is it?
We usually have a cohort that starts every 2 months. So periodically there'll be a Linux cohort or an AWS cohort starting.
Gotcha. Okay,
But
perfect.
it's cohort based.
Okay, nice. Well, Paloma, I appreciate you so much for coming on here. I had a blast talking to you, learning about your career, your story, your journey, and then also about your students as well. Like you guys are doing some great stuff. So I appreciate you pulling back the curtain a little bit and revealing the best kept secret in IT. Because I think, like again, like a lot of people don't know about this. And you mentioned you used that phrase earlier. So it's like, hey, I think more people need to know about these opportunities that are out there, and that way, just kind of open up their world of opportunity and what they can achieve. So thanks so much for sharing your journey and telling us about Yellowtail Tech.
Yes, thanks for having me and thanks for doing this. I think you're doing a key job here, sharing all this information and exposing people to all these opportunities.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And for you guys who watched, I hope you all enjoyed hearing Paloma's story. I hope you guys check out Yellowtail.tech. I'll put a link to their website below in the description, so make sure you check it out. Maybe sign up for a consultation, figure out if this is something that you're interested in. And also, make sure you stay tuned for future episodes. We're going to be coming back every week with not only great interviews, inspirational stories, but then also some great jobs that you guys should check out in apprenticeship programs, all that good stuff. So that's it for this episode. We'll see you all next week. Take care.